get out of your way, because when I get out of my way and I actually open myself up, like I have a business coach we use now, and I actually open myself up to allowing someone else to give me some advice and say, hey, Sandra, this, right, you really need to go down this route, like hold back on this, do this. It really opens me up for great things to happen. And that, I mean, that's really what's been happening now for us with Tidy Spaces, is like when I get out of the way, all these things start to happen, and it's unbelievable.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the CEO and founder of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Sandra DeMaria?
DeMaria.
DeMaria. I was like, oh, I'm going to slaughter this. I was close, but
No,
not
you were
quite.
close.
So we'll just go by Sandra. Then I'll make sure to do it. But give you a quick introduction to Sandra. So didn't go to college right away. Wanted to go into the Olympics with horses, which sounds really interesting. And then kind of things fell through with the horses. Didn't quite end up working out. So then ended up going off to university. I went to the North Carolina. Got a degree. I think it was in German and psychology, if I remember right. And then went into sales. Started out, I think, with copiers, and then got into pharmaceutical sales, and then biotech, and then took a bit of time off to figure out what she wanted to do after doing sales for a period of time. Started a company helping public speakers booking gigs, and kind of started that business with a few other partners. And then some of those partners fell through. Closed that business after a few years, and then went into more of the event venue business with helping other businesses. Did that for a couple of years as well, and then decided to go out do her own thing, which is what leads her where she's at today, which is with Tidy Spaces, and she'll get into a little bit more about what that is and how that's going. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Sandra.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So now I have to ask, just because I messed up on the last name, is it Sandra or Sandra? Which one do you prefer?
Sandra is
Okay.
what I prefer. I will answer to either.
Hey, I got it right the first time, but I'm like,
you definitely got that right. Definitely got that right.
So I gave kind of a brief run through of your journey, but let's go back a bit in time to where you were going to. Your plan was to do horses in the Olympics. So tell us a little bit about that and how your journey got started.
Yeah, so I rode horses since I was 7 years old. It was just my passion and my love. When I was in high school, I had a horse that was definitely Olympic material, and that was kind of our goal, our plan. And I graduated high school in 1992, and instead of going away to college, I took 3-4 years off to try out for the Olympic team. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. I gave it my best. Things don't always work out as planned. And because I was a good student, I made straight A's. There was I had other adults that I rode with that were doctors, lawyers, teachers, and they were like, Sandra, you can always come back to horses. They'll always be here, but go to school, get a degree, because you got to have a trade to fall back on, because very few people make it in the horse industry. It's an extremely expensive sport. It's a very risky sport. I've had several friends with major injuries that have not been able to come back. And it's like 1% of the people really do it to make a living. I mean, the people that like do the race horses and own them, they're making millions, but that's a whole different sport than what I did. I did 3-day eventing. So I decided to go to school and I got a degree actually in biology and German.
So let me just dive in really quick.
Yeah.
So what is, for those that don't know, and myself included, what is 3-day eventing with horses, or what were you going to do in the Olympics with horses? Because I'll plead my ignorance. I didn't even honestly know that horses were in the Olympics. So I'm more than curious as to what you do with horses in the Olympics.
Well, in the Olympics, they always keep the equestrian like 200 miles from the action, because especially you need a lot of room for them. You need places to board them, and then you need all the arenas to show them in. So 3-day eventing, it's basically like a triathlon for horses. The first phase is dressage. It's your basics. It's flat work. The second phase is cross country, which tests their endurance and speed and your bravery, because you're like running around the field with your pants on fire, jumping like these huge things. It's crazy, but it's fun. And then the third phase is stadium jumping. So a lot of people are familiar with show jumpers. That's kind of like a smaller version of that. So it's tough, and it usually takes place over 3 days. Hence, it's called 3-day eventing. So that's
All
what
right,
that is.
interesting. I just was
Yeah.
curious, and it shows a bit of my ignorance. My wife
That's
is
it.
into the
No.
Olympics a lot more than I am, so she'll probably tell me how I should have known this. But I appreciate the insight. So now that
Yeah.
that fell through, and you went off to college, and you started in saying you got German and psychology, is that right?
Biology.
Biology. I said
It's a science.
psychology. It was biology. Fair enough.
Mhm. So
So once you got those, now as you're coming out of school, how did you take German and biology and get into sales?
I always wanted to be in science. That was my science and math were my two favorite subjects in school. And I really was going down a pre-vet or a pre-med route. Um, and I worked at a country club during college. I went to Coastal Carolina, a small private school down there in Conway, South Carolina. And I worked with all these doctors. And after talking to them, they're like, don't go to medical school. They're like, the amount of malpractice, like, they're filling me in on all this stuff. And a
Mm.
lot of them have already been sued like 3 times. And they're like, unless you go into a specialty, the money's not there anymore. Like, you should have heard them. They all would have done it differently. And I'm like, really? And so they're like, you need to go sell pharmaceuticals. You have the right personality. You're such a good salesperson. You're smart enough. You'll learn all the pharmacology stuff. And they like, you'd be foolish because you'll make great money. You'll have a life. You won't get sued. You'll have your weekends off. Like, you should have
Those
heard
dang
them.
lawyers, they ruin everything.
Yeah. So I basically, I started having second guesses about, do I really want to be a doctor, this, that, and the other. And I kind of went and talked to other people in other careers and, that did sales, that did different things. And I just realized that this was something I really, really wanted to do. And like, because the thing about going to medical school, it's a commitment and it's a ton of money. You can't
Mhm.
do it halfway.
Hmm.
And if you have any little bit holding you back, like that, to get into that kind of student loans and that kind of, you're talking, I mean, most people I know that did medical school, it's $500,000 or more they're paying back. It's ridiculous. So I was like, well, I can always go back to medical school. It's not that hard to, apply and try to get in. So
Hmm.
I decided, I came back to Greenville, South Carolina, and went to a job fair. I talked to a couple of pharmaceutical companies, and they were like, well, you have no business to business sales experience. When you do that for 2 years, come back and talk to us. And I'm like, well, what do I need to do? And they're like, either go sell cars, cell phones, or copiers. So at their job fair was a company called, at that time, it was called Quality Business Systems. They sold digital systems, basically copiers. And I went for an interview and got hired on the spot. And that's really how it all got started. And the guy that hired me is still my mentor and friend today. And that was that was 21 years ago, 2000.
And I like the point and it was a small point of the story, which is they said, go sell one of these three things. And he took that literally, okay, I'll pick copiers.
Just it was there, and I was like, how hard can this be to land this job? And it's hysterical because I go in for this interview and I'm thinking, this, like, I'm looking at all these other people around me, and I don't even think they care I had a college degree. They asked me a couple questions. I don't even remember what it was. That was so long ago, but they just like were looking for somebody. And I remember my boss told me this years ago. He said, you just had this hustle about you. You had something like an edge about you. And I just knew that if people told you no, you weren't going to care. And he's like, and I knew nothing about sales, nothing about the process, nothing about copiers. I mean, if I could plug it in, we were doing good. And so that's how my sales career got started. And to this day, I still use some of the things I learned from that job, which is just unbelievable. When you think back 21 years ago, it's like, oh my God, I still do some of the stuff that Bill taught me. And I'm so great. His name is Bill Canamere. He has a company in Charlotte, and he's just so great. And I'm so grateful for everything he taught me years ago.
Hmm.
And he's a really great person and has done very well for himself. So yeah.
So,
So
so you do that now for a period of time. Now, what made you got it? You did copiers, and then did you get? And then I think if I remember right, you did get into
yes.
pharmaceutical sales. Is that
Yes,
right?
I did copiers for 2 years, and I mean, it really was a great way to find out if you're made for sales because it's a ton of rejection. You have to, and this was back when cold calling, knocking on doors was how you did it. Now it's so different. And I mean, literally, I would just go in and be like, "Hey, do you want a copier?" I knew nothing. I had no skills, nothing. But he taught me and trained me everything I needed to know. And all I did was I had the hustle and the grind and the grit that a lot of people don't have. It was something he couldn't teach. And
Hmm.
I would just set up these appointments and demos, and then I'd bring him in and he did his thing. And I don't even know how we got what we got. Eventually, I learned what I was doing. But the first few months, I just was like, I set 7 appointments for tomorrow. And he's like, great, let's just, and a couple of them were like bogus. He's like, why do you have me in here? I'm like, I don't know. They said they wanted a copier. Like, what
Oh,
else? You told me.
if they said they wanted to buy it, that's what I was told to do.
So, but then like over time, he finessed me and I got a skill set and it got to where I didn't need him. I could go close my own deals, do all my own paperwork, but it was a lot of fun. It was hard because the money, like we got nothing for a salary. It was the commissions you made the money on. And
Hmm.
then while I was working for him, I had a pharmaceutical company. At that time, it was a contract company called Cardinal Health,
Hmm.
and they did an interview with me. I actually went and met the boss, the manager for lunch, Bill Paisley. Unfortunately, he passed away this past year. And he called me up and he's like, I like you. We're like relaunching a product. We're going to have a couple new territories. I will have a job for you in 2 to 3 months. And I was like, okay. He's like, just chill out and hang doing what you're doing. Don't take any other offers.
Hmm.
And I had 2 other people that knew this manager. They're like, yeah, he wants to hire you. You're good. And 3 weeks later, he called me and said, somebody just left the company. The territory is an hour away from you, but you can at least get started with us. We can get your training going. And I got in with Cardinal Health. They got bought from a company called Bar Laboratories. And then Bar Laboratories later on down through the years got bought from Teva Pharmaceuticals. Teva is still in business today. I believe they are the top producer of all generics. I mean, what are they, like a 6-7 billion dollar company? They're big. And I did all women's health,
Hmm.
called on OBGYNs. So
So now you
that's
did
kind of,
pharmaceutical sales for a while, and you went back and forth between a couple of the various companies. Now,
yeah.
once you got, and then I think after that you took a break before doing public speaking and helping others to do public speaking. Or tell us a
Yeah.
little bit what made you decide to take a break. So you got the degree, and then you said, okay, sales is the path to go. Then you went and sold copiers, got the experience. Then you got into pharmaceuticals, which is what you were shooting for.
Right.
What made you decide to go a different direction or to take that break and then eventually get more into helping people do public speaking or book public speaking goods
Yeah.
or gigs,
So
not book. Yeah,
gigs.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I did pharma and then I did a biotech for about 2 years after. And so I did a total with all that about 12 plus years. And at the end of it, unfortunately, I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this. These pharma companies, they're very greedy. You have, it got very over inundated with salespeople. You had all these pods, and the way they had too many people selling the same product, and it's a lot of money they're spending, but they're also spending a ton of money on drug and research and samples and all of that, and it got very unethical. Like I had a manager, one of my last managers that I worked for. Um, I mean, he's a nice guy, but he just wasn't for me. He was a bully and he wanted you to sell off label, with which the FDA and the Department of Justice would not be okay with. And they're
Mm.
threatening your job. They're threatening you, like you need to do this or you're not going to have a job. Now, I was in the top 5% of my company for about 4 years straight. I was
Mm.
always at 123% of my sales. I was untouchable. So I, of course, pushed the envelope. Like I'd not talk back to him, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that because it's not legal. It's not ethical. And that's not okay. Like you cannot sell a product off label. That is so wrong on so many levels. I don't know
Mm,
if anybody saw that movie Love and Other Drugs. That was written by an actual farmer rep for Eli Lilly. And there's things that happen in that movie. And of course, it's Hollywood based. So things are taken over the top. But there are some things in there that, yeah, you really can't do. Like, that's not okay. So they had, we had like a lot of layoffs going on, like something like a 60% layoff. And I just called the company and said, if you're looking for volunteers, I'm ready to go because I was done. I
mm,
literally I believed enough in myself to know I could find another job, I could do something else, and there was always other opportunities out there. And I don't need this. I don't need to be bullied and threatened and, I want to sleep well at night and feel like I'm doing something for others and putting something out there that's worthwhile. And I was done. And so they call us one day and let us go. And everybody else is crying. I'm drinking lunch. I mean, I'm like, hey, let's go have a cocktail because there's something else out there.
mm.
And I think that's what people forget is what their worth is. And they get sucked into like, my boss tells me I'm this and that's all I can do. So, I
So,
then
oh, go
took
ahead.
about sorry, I ended up taking about 2 years off. I traveled, I had fun. I turned 40, had a big party. Um, and then I realized, well, maybe I should go back to work and do something. So I just started thinking about what I like to do, and I met this girl through, at that time it was all the meetups, the networking events. And I met this girl named Michelle, who we just started talking. And I had a concept about helping speakers find gigs because I had a couple friends that were speakers and they always struggled finding paid gigs. And what it is they were really good at speaking, they just weren't good at selling themselves. And I'm like, oh, you just need somebody to sell you. I
Hmm.
can do that. How hard can that be? And so through that, we started this company called iCubed Agency, which stands for Influence, Inspire, Impact. And we met some other people. We ended up having 5 partners, which probably wasn't the smartest thing, but it was a good learning experience. So we got into this with 5 people. And unfortunately, I think 3 of them really wanted to start getting paid within 3 months of the business starting. And, as an entrepreneur and these startups, you don't always, as the owner, you don't always get paid right away. Sometimes you do, but I think it just depends. And it's really hard when you have 5 people that are running this business and only one of us right here was the only one out there selling. And they're all like, well, why aren't we getting paid? And I'm like, well, go out and sell something and maybe you will. Like, I mean, we all have to kind of contribute and wear multiple hats. So that's how I got into that. And it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of really interesting speakers, some really good, some needed work, but we set it up where they just paid us a percentage of like what they got paid.
Hmm.
And we also ended up doing some conferences. One was an anti-bullying conference that we didn't do any marketing. We didn't know what we were doing. We really didn't. And um, we somehow had 400 people show up for this thing with minimal everything, but it turned out to be a lot of fun. And it was for preteens and teens. A ton of kids showed up and got a lot out of it. And it was amazing the stories that were shared. The different people that came to speak. A lot of people wrote books about bullying that came and talked to these kids, and it was a great experience. And it's something like it's one of those things that I would love to get back into something like that down the road because it was such a good thing to do for the local community, for the kids. And it was something that you could offer in a lot of cities all over this country that could be very beneficial. Because bullying is really different from where it was when we were kids. So I really enjoyed that, and I'd love to get into something like that again down the road.
Well,
But
that's cool. No, it sounds like a fun business. Sounds like, always some trade-offs with partners. And, if everybody pulls their own weight and everybody feels like they're contributing, and inevitably my experience is that you'll always have some that pull more weight than others and
yeah.
contribute more, and how everybody views it. So it's always a bit of a juggle. So now you did that for a couple years, and then I think you transitioned or moved into doing a event venues business with another business or with other businesses. Is that right?
Yes. So while I had iCubed Agency going, I had a company reach out to me that had it was a catering company. And they had just purchased or rented an event venue, and they were having a hard time getting people to, rent it out. They're like, we don't know really what to do with the space. And I can't remember how I met them. It was probably at some event or something. And I talked to the owners, and they did a quick interview with me. And I said, well, I'll come in part time. I can give you about 20, 25 hours a week. This is what I can do. That lasted about a month, maybe 2 months. And then they're like, we want you full time. And I said, okay. I said, well, if I do it, this is, I want to work from home. Like, I had all my list of stuff, and they worked with me. They were really fair. Well, then about halfway into 2016, it was around the summer, the owner approached me to take over the company. He goes, I have a lot of problems. And I'm like, you think? He had people that were in charge of me that should have never been in charge. They had no business. They didn't know anything about running a business. They had no standard operating procedures. It was like they were a really good bartender, and they were made sales director with no formal education, nothing. It was just,
Mm.
and he couldn't understand why I wasn't making money. And I'm like, well, because you have somebody sitting there selling your wedding venue to people who can't afford it. And instead of her saying we're not the right fit, she's just discounting things across the board, even discounting labor. Labor is one of the most expensive things in that industry. You don't discount it. And he wasn't making money. He was having a lot of problems. So basically, he approached me and said, you have everything I'm looking for in a leader. You're exactly what I want. I need you to take over this. And I was like, no. He approached me like 6 times. I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't want to do this. This is a ridiculous hours I'm going to work. Like, there's a lot of problems here. I don't want to take it over. So then he finally said, I have to do something. You have to help me. And I said, okay, we're in September of 2016. We got about 3, 4 months left to the end of the year. I'll fill in while you interview and find the right person. But that's it. And I need a raise. So he gives me a raise. I took over, and I had a meeting with them December of 2016. And I'm like, hey, have you found anybody? What's going on? No, we really like you and want you to stay. What do we have to do to keep you? And he said, can you show me what you were paid with pharma and all that? So I pulled out some old offer letters, and I said, don't pass out, because I mean, he's a small business. He's a $3 million company. He's not going to be able to afford what I got with pharma. So he looked at it. He goes, I can't afford this. I'm like, I know you can't, and I'm not going to ask you to do that because you would end up bankrupt. I said, but what you can is this. And I wrote some stuff down that I wanted. We agreed on most of it. I mean, it was some negotiation. And so I said, okay, I will take over on one condition. I have to let go about 70% of the people that currently work for you on the catering and the event venue. And you need to let me hire who I need to hire. And you need to invest some money. You're going to pay a little more in your salary to get the right people in here. And don't call me up and complain about it. I need 6 months to get this where it needs to be for you. And basically, don't bother me and yell at me that I'm costing you money. And his wife, thank God for her. She was amazing. She got it. She was very progressive thinking. She understood what I was trying to do. She saw the writing on the wall, and she totally backed me up. And if I couldn't get it from him, I got it from her if it was something I needed. And within 6 months, he was only making about $60 a person when he did a wedding. This was the venue, the catering, the bar, everything. Within 6 months, he was making over 150 a person because I changed up how we did it. I put in a contract. I mean, I researched contracts. I called his attorney to have them help me draw. I would like write up a contract, send it to them to make sure it's legal because, they make it all fancy with the big
Sure.
words. You know that. And that was it. We turned it around, and I did that until April of 2019.
Now, what made you
I just
decide on April 2019 to kind of, after putting in a whole bunch of effort, building
Yeah.
the business, turning it around, what made you decide, okay, I want to go do my own thing?
Well, anybody that works in the event industry, whether you're a caterer, you run an event venue, you're an event planner, a wedding planner, it's a lot of hours, a lot of time, and you give up a lot of your personal life. And I just kind of was like, I'm done. Like, I did it for almost 3 years. I was tired. He was wanting to get out of it. I knew that. Like, he actually got out of the venue and just kept the catering business. So I just sent them a nice note and said, it's time for me to go. I'll give you 30 days and that's it. And I really had no plan. Everybody's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to take like at least 30 days off and clear. I was exhausted. I mean, I worked 80 to 100 hours a week. And even though I was in charge, I still didn't work for myself. I mean, he was the only person I had to answer to, the boss of the business, but I still had to answer to someone, and I
Sure.
just didn't want to anymore.
So
And
now,
so,
so you make that decision and you say, okay, I'm gonna go do my own. I'll take a little bit of time off. I'll give them 30 no's, take a little bit of time off. Now, how did you, decide from there to go to what you're doing? I think now, which is Tidy Spaces. Kind of, how did you land on that, and then how has that gone since you've made that transition to be your own boss?
yeah. So what happened was, at the same time, my current business partner, Susan, she had reached out to me. Actually, I hadn't talked to her in a few years, and I met her years ago through a retail store because her background was fashion and retail. She reached out to me. She was like a regional manager for Talbot's, and they had shut down the store in Charleston, and she was not in a position to move with them. They wanted to move her, and she reached out to me that she's not sure what she wants to do. Blah 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 blah. And this was right around April of 2019. And I was like, hey, Suze, I said, you remember when I bought my house? Like, this was like 7 years ago, and I had the closets custom done, and you came in and organized for them, and they looked amazing. And, I've stuck with every system you put into play. I said, how come you haven't turned that into a business? Like, that's a great, I said, don't you know there's a whole national association of professional organizers out there? Like, this is a business. And it doesn't look like it's that hard to start. Da, 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 da. She goes, Sandra, I've thought about that because I have a couple friends that I did a few things for, like I did for you. But she goes, Sandra, there's things about the business I don't know. And I wouldn't even know how to start a website, social media. Like, you got to be able to do all that now. And that's just not my thing. And I said, but I know how to do that. Like, I could help you. So we met in like later that month, um, at a Mexican restaurant in Hilton Head, South Carolina, over tacos and tequila. We came up with Tidy Spaces. The name, the concept, it took us about an hour to put it all together. And we just had our 2-year-old birthday on Mother's Day, May 9th of 2019. We officially were LLC'd. And that first year, we didn't do a ton of clients. We did just a few things because we were really trying to figure stuff out. Like, do we want a website? All these things that go with the business, putting in operations, a process. And we just kind of came together, and it was around January of 2020. Her and I talked and said, okay, what do we really want to do with this? Like, are we going to do this full time? Is this going to be a hobby? Where are we going? And I was at the point where it's like, well, I just want to work for myself. So we can definitely do something with this. There's other things I want to do. And we just decided, okay, we're going to move forward with this. So we hit the streets. Like, we got people booked, we had clients lined up, we were doing a ton of stuff with seniors and people like downsizing from big houses to assisted living. That was kind of becoming our specialty. Well, then what happened in March of 2020? COVID. Do you think
Mhm.
any senior citizen was going to let us in their house? Even with mask and gloves on? No way. We lost
Mm.
every client we booked from March and through April, I think May, June. I had clients booked March through June. Every single client canceled. And I
Mm.
didn't know if I was going to get them back. And we couldn't even get into like assisted living to help them get moved in, things like that. So we then were like, okay, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we got to go virtual. I said, there's this, all this Zoom out there and FaceTime. We got to figure out how to do this. We got to really hit social media hard. We've just got to do more. So we ended up hiring 3 amazing young women that work for me that help us with content, social media, blogs, things like that, that are way smarter than those of us that are a little older. And they're super talented, and they really helped us drive that social media and make sure it looks good. We're getting real followers, not fake ones. And we just then were like, we did a few virtual, like we are right now on Zoom, helping people organize their closets, like whatever you can come up with to survive. And then by end of May, beginning of June, we were able to start getting into people's houses. And I did some work with a realtor. I had several realtors I did work with, and we just started building. And it's just kind of been a snowball effect. I actually ended up coming back to South Carolina because unfortunately my dad is not doing well, but things here have been going really well. And we've had our ups and downs, but overall it's great. Like everything that you wish for is happening. And now it's to the point where I'm getting ready to hire some salespeople to help with sales because Susan and I are getting so busy with the jobs. Like you got to find that balance. And I just put an ad out and I must have like 50 resumes to read now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to really do this all over again. But this
Hey,
is the fun.
always plenty to keep you busy.
Yeah.
So
But this is the fun of it. Like, it's that for me, it's like that drive that like somebody says, like, when do you work? I'm like, I'm working all the time, but it sometimes doesn't feel like work. I don't know if
sure.
that's like that for you. Because when
Absolutely. No, always used to joke that, my hobbies were startups in the sense that usually if I wasn't working doing my business, my mind was always thinking about the next business idea, or the next startup, or the next thing I'd want.
yeah,
So, well, and there's always more things to talk about than time to
yeah,
talk about them. So as we start to wrap towards the end of the podcast, that kind of brings us up to where you're at today. I always have two questions that I ask at the end of each podcast. So why don't we jump to those now?
okay.
So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
So I think the worst business decision was, I think, probably when I was getting into the iCubed agency. And I think something that happened was not asking for help, allowing my ego to get in the way of what we were doing, and not asking either my partners for help or like other
Mhm.
people, whether it was a business coach or somebody else who had done it. I think that really probably was part of the downfall of that business. I mean, I'm glad in a way the business failed because I learned a ton from it. But I think not asking for help was the biggest mistake because I think had I like sat down and gotten some help in areas where I thought I needed or I thought I didn't need it when I really needed it, I
Mm.
think it would have been different. But I think I needed to learn that lesson. So I
No,
think
and I
that was
and
the
I think
biggest.
that that one's oftentimes as a entrepreneur or as a startup or minded individual, someone that likes to be in charge. It's always hard to step back and
Mhm.
say, "Hey, wait a minute, I don't know everything. Some things I need to learn. I need to ask for help." A lot of times, there's a lot of people willing to give that help and willing to give input, give feedback, pitch in or whatnot. But if you never ask, they'll never know to help. So I think that that's an easy mistake to learn, but some definitely or easy mistake to make, but it definitely something to learn from. So now as we jump to the second question, which is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you give them?
I think, and this I just recently really learned, get out of your own way. I think I am someone that I can do anything I want when I am like on fire and at the top of my game. But when I'm in a place where like either I'm not in agreement or I'm resisting or in the wrong mindset, oh my gosh, what a big chaotic mess it can be. And I think I've had to learn this. And I think anybody that is truly that entrepreneur who's driven and ambitious, we want to control everything and do it our way. Just like, the Frank Sinatra song, I Did It My Way, which would
Sure.
be my theme.
Mm,
um, but get out of your way because when I get out of my way and I actually open myself up, like I have a business coach we use now, and I actually open myself up to allowing someone else to give me some advice and say, hey, Sandra, this right, you really need to go down this route, like hold back on this, do this. It really opens me up for great things to happen. And that, I mean, that's really what's been happening now for us with Tidy Spaces is like when I get out of the way, all these things start to happen and it's unbelievable. And I'm so grateful that that is a lesson I've learned. I'm willing to learn it. I hope I don't have to repeat it again, but I might. But I think that's the biggest thing that if you want to get into this, just get out of your way and listen to others because
no,
that has truly helped me.
and I like that. I think that that's certainly good advice and certainly something that people can take to heart as they're getting their startup up and going. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to connect up with you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out, find out more?
So we have a website, tidyspaces.com. Also, I can be reached at Sandra at tidyspaces.com, or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And Instagram, it's the Tidy Spaces, and Facebook, it's Tidy Spaces LLC. We do a lot of tips and tricks and advice out there for organizing and anything to get you organized and motivated in your home or office. But I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out, and I look forward to hopefully meeting some of your followers one day.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage everybody, especially those that need to keep their spaces tidy, which is just about everybody, to reach out, find out more, and get involved. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you again, Sandra, for coming on. It's been it's been a pleasure.
Yep.
Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com. We'd love to have you on the show. Two more things as listeners. One, make sure to click subscribe in your podcast player so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And two, leave us a review so others can find out about all of our awesome episodes. Last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with the business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Thank you again, Sandra, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much, Devin. It's been a pleasure.